This video will be a review of the first 6 lessons of the Algebra Unit, Module 4, Expressions and Equations. And the first 2 lessons, we investigated the relationship between addition and subtraction and between multiplication and division. And we recognized that they were opposites of each other. So in order to have this equation, where you start with 48 and get 48 back, you have to add 12 to subtract 12 because the value of this is 0. Okay, and this is called the additive identity property, because when you add any number to 0, you get the number's identity back. That works for subtraction as well. You can subtract 0 from any number and you will get the number back that you started with. Okay, so now the second, we also looked at the relationship between multiplication and division, and the students and I talked about what could you start with to get 65 back when you were multiplying or dividing. 65 times 1 gives you 65. This is the multiplicative identity property. So if this is a value of 1, this number is 65. Okay, and we talked about that for quite some time. Then we went to lesson 3. And we talked about the relationship between addition and multiplication. So they had to write equivalent expressions, no equal signs, for the following. This is the same as 3 times g. We've been using the dot as well. We've been trying to stay away from 3 times g because the times sign can be mistaken at times for an x. So this is the coefficient, and g would be the variable. The coefficient in this term tells us how many of the variable we have. We have 3 g's, and the students have to understand that multiplication is the same as repeated addition. Then they had to rewrite this. This is going to be 3a, this expression, and there are 5 g's. So it's 3a plus 5g. This is a 2-term expression, 1, 2. Then we went on to lesson 4, and that talked about the relationship between subtraction and division, and we again talked about equivalent expressions. So 12 divided by 3 gives you 4. Division is the same as repeated subtraction. So if I took 3 and subtracted it 4 times from 12, we talked about what the value would be. 12 minus 3 is 9, 9 minus 3 is 6, 6 minus 3 is 3, and 3 minus 3 gives this expression a value of 0. Okay? And then we looked at it in reverse, and the students had to look at this repeated subtraction problem and talk about what it meant as a division. This is 36. It's getting divided by 6. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So 36 divided by 6 is 6. Then we went on to lesson 5. And we talked about equivalent expressions, again, major theme in 6th grade. And we talked about exponents. That is repeated multiplication. The exponent tells you how many of the base you have. And you must know that exponents are repeated multiplication. Okay, and this next one is g to the power of 5, because there are 5 g's that are getting repeated in multiplication. And then we talked about evaluating exponents. I always have the students write down the base the number of times first. Then I use what's called the check mark technique. 8 times 8 is 64. 64 times 8 is 512. 512 times 8 is 4,096. Then they had 1/6 to the 3rd power. So we're going to write down 1/6 3 times. 1 times 1 is 1. 6 times 6 is 36. And I still have to multiply that by 1 more, 1/6. And the answer is 1 over 216. And then our last lesson before our quiz is order of operations. And we talked about the order in which things occur. And we talked about please excuse my dear Aunt Sally and PEMDAS. These are just little clever techniques to help us remember the order. Parentheses, exponents, multiply or divide, whichever comes right first from left to right. Add and subtract. In this case, the exponent is outside of parentheses, so you're going to do 4 plus 2 first, which is 6 to the third power minus 16. So we've done our parentheses. Now we're going to do our exponents. You have 3 sixes in multiplication. 6 times 6 is 36, times 6 is 216. Then you're going to bring down your minus 16, and this is your last step, is going to give you 200. The last one, you do your parentheses first. There are no exponents. Then you do your multiplication or division, whichever comes first from left to right. And look, Mrs. Kramer made a mistake, because this last step would give you a negative number. This would give you negative 18. Let me change this. Let me change this to 156. 156, will that be divisible by 8? Well, you see if you can change Mrs. Kramer's as a bonus. If you can change her expression to be correct.